You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. All right. Welcome back to Public Comment, where we're definitely talking like we usually talk municipal politics of Detroit, hosted by yours truly, Khary Frazier. Detroit is different, and also my brother in arms on this project, Malachi Barrett, Bridge Detroit. Malachi, how are you?
Good morning. You want to talk about the budget? Uh-oh, there we go.
Okay, there we go.
Let's talk about the budget, baby.
Yeah, we're definitely talking budget. The Detroit budget is finalized now. And so much in the finalization of this. We're gonna go from council member to council member. So people know, you can go to Malachi's notebook at bridgedetroit.com. Check that out every week. But this week you kind of go through this, and we're gonna touch on a little bit more nuance than just in the stories what was read, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the overall budget is $2.8 billion with a B. It's a lot of money. The general fund, which pays for most of like the operational stuff the city does, is about $1.4 billion with a B. What we're going to talk about today is a much smaller pot of money that the city council was negotiating for. Basically, the mayor has the ability to execute the budget and put it together. And it's up to the city council, who has, as many have said, the power of the purse. Legislative body controls, spending decisions, basically. It's up to the council to authorize the budget, although they don't have as much of a role in kind of shaping most of it. That comes down to like the Office of Chief Financial Officer and all of the kind of administration staff under the mayor, who work as his financial officers. So after, we've been covering these for quite a while now. There were departmental hearings that went on for about a month. That we covered in collaboration with some other nonprofit newsrooms. And then last week were what we call executive sessions, where basically the council gets to negotiate for shifting some money around toward projects that they want, like their priorities. So they basically they moved $33 million toward projects and departments, by using different kind of streams of revenue. So there was this long kind of negotiation process where they were working with the administration to move some money here, move some money there. And it's a pretty good sum of money, 33 million, but it also kind of pales in comparison to the general fund overall. So there's a lot of this to dig into. We've got a lot of coverage on bridgedetroit.com. But the budget was approved on Monday, and the last step of funding council priorities was also handled on that day. So that's what we're going to dive into a little bit today.
Most definitely my brother. So let's begin this whole thing. You go from council member to council member. So District 1, we're going by district. Council President Pro Tem James Tate. So 2.5 billion. So tree removal, put in for a lot of tree removal. If anybody's ever been over there at District 1, tree removal is one of those big things. I remember when we were actually walking the district, because some of those trees that are so old, and like the concrete and trees impacting water lines and old trees, dead trees, that is one of those communities that was big on that. I didn't even know tree removal was so big in District 1 until we did that. I don't know. Do you remember that when we were going in that neighborhood?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I see it kind of all over the city, where you've got old trees that are hanging over power lines. And that's what a lot of this is aimed at. These are for trees on private property, by the way. So the homeowners have the ability now to get some funding from the city. This was a program that was started last year by Tate, and he secured funding to keep it going. But yeah, basically, if you have a dead, dangerous, or diseased tree, the Triple D program, you can get the city to come out and take care of that for you. And so, it really is aimed at helping people that are kind of at risk of having a big storm coming through, and then you've got a branch coming through your window, or knocking your roof, or knocking your power out.
And also, we're going to continue to District 2, Councilmember Calloway. And there's so many more things in detail. So step up if you want to add something else. So I thought that things in lead hazards, after school programs, a couple of different things. But Callaway always advocating for the people. The biggest things, like we say, the lead hazards program, one-time funding. And this kind of goes more into like the home development funds that are already looked at as things need to be improved for that with roofing and what follows through. I'm wondering what and how this will be executed, more so by those that will do it. But this is definitely needed, as lead paint is real, pipes and things like that. But the paint, it's still many homes that have that, because we think of the housing stock that's throughout the city of Detroit. Definitely District 2 has some historic homes. Some of those neighborhoods in District 2 have been designated as historic, which means that you have to upkeep it a little bit differently too. What's your take on this? I don't know if you want to add or speak to anything else. Also, some information and some monies for some Black-owned farms in Eastern Market. The Avenue of Fashion, going with some banners, some things that I've definitely heard from community and community speaking to.
Yeah, I think the lead encapsulation is a really important one, and it's different than lead removal. Encapsulation is basically you put a layer of some kind of sealing paint over the top of the lead paint. It's a lot cheaper than removing it, or scraping it off by a margin of like thousands of dollars. I'm trying to pull up this report that she had done that basically shows the need is pretty vast. I mean, you said it, the housing stock in Detroit is really old. And so by nature of that, lead paint was being used pretty heavily when most of the housing stock in the city was created. And it would cost several $1 million more to actually fully fund this. So if I can pull this up really quickly, but this is $2.5 million initially to get it started. And, a couple of interesting things about this, the debate around lending of credit and what are the legal constraints around doing things that help individuals as opposed to the public as a whole came up again. As people might be familiar with, the law department has argued that, under the Michigan Constitution, you essentially can't use general fund dollars for anything that has a limited kind of private good. But what counts as that is up for debate. For example, the city attorney had said that like job development programs are considered a public good. The tree removal program, which it helps private owners get things off their property, is considered a public good. In the past, things like mural projects have counted. Blight and demo cleanup has counted, but lead remediation doesn't count apparently. And this, frustrated council members around this debate that we've gone into many a time before. But ultimately, Whitfield Callaway was resolute on this and kept it in the budget. So it'll be interesting to see how the city actually implements this, how they spend the money, because they technically don't believe that they have the legal ability to do it, and it's not really clear like how exactly this is going to work, how many people are going to get served by the program, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, clearly things like that always, have a how will it be done.
Let me give you a quick. So I found this report. So basically, the city has estimated the cost to remediate lead from 43,000 homes in the city, which is probably on the low end of their estimate in terms of how many houses have lead paint in it, would cost about $25 million. So this is about a tenth of the funding that's probably needed to address the whole program. And I should also say a lot of this is aimed at rental units. So smaller landlords, smaller in terms of like they have fewer properties, this kind of like mom and pop landlords that they talk about. Because, a lot of these houses that are in the state are rental properties where there are young children. And that's a lot of where the concern from Whitfield Callaway came from, that we are not prioritizing public health in this particular issue.
So with that, kind of goes on to and Scott Benson basically adding to funds to increase spending on seasonal events. also money for Charles H. Wright Museum. I'm going to say, in reference to the seasonal events, one of the things, I don't know if people even know this, but the Motor City Kwanzaa Kanara that Detroit is Different has streamed for the past 2 years. That's actually one of the events connected to Scott Benson and Scott Benson's office. So I'm pretty sure things like that will now have a little bit more bolster moving forward. I can imagine that. And the Charles Wright Museum, this is, Benson. I think we can just kind of keep moving from that. Letitia, her piece was 2 million in one-time funding, capital improvements. Can you break this one down?
Yeah, and a lot of these spending amounts actually end up being for different capital investments for the Charles H. Wright Museum that Scott Benson and Council President Sheffield had advocated for. That was to do some major facility repairs, and same for the branch library.
Mm-hmm.
It's been closed now for, I think, 2 years or so. It's been closed for a while. I believe HVAC is like a major thing they need to get fixed. There might be some roof repairs. A lot of these older buildings have elevator issues that need to get repaired as well. So I'm not as up on the library what's needed exactly, but that $2 million is supposed to help it open up.
Well, I'm definitely Detroiters for Tax Justice. Shout out Russ Ballant and everything. He would definitely argue that, like, if you never tax captured the money from the libraries, you wouldn't need to refund the libraries. So if people don't understand this, meaning that money that is already supposed to go to the libraries off of taxes from villages and everything else is not directly getting to the libraries because it's being captured for other investments for the development projects of downtown primarily. And if the libraries were to have access to all of their funding, then they wouldn't need access to this other funding. It's one of those weird things that, well, I don't even want to say weird things. It's just one of those realities that should be changed. Let the libraries have the library's money. Keep your hands off the library's money. We like libraries as a public good. I do want to speak to that. So, and Mary Sheffield, it was a lot. Mary Sheffield, it's a lot there. Supporting the Wright Museum funding, court updates. So 36th District Court, eviction defense, which that kind of goes directly into the ideas of advocating for citizens, Eastern market improvements, a business boost to the DGC. It's a good amount, and this is just the first half. Auditor General, Office of Inspector General, expanding the funds. Mary was, in there stomping it out. What you got to say?
Yeah, so there's the Wright Museum that we talked about. They need some elevator improvements and other capital. They came in and asked for quite a bit of money from the council. They've got some major facility issues that they need to get fixed. The court updates, that's another interesting one. I'm not sure exactly what needs to happen there, but that's a pretty good chunk of money. Eviction defense, I think the $2 million definitely helps, but folks were very vocal about the right to counsel program being underfunded, not fully funded. And they want to see, I think it was like $12 million added toward that. So, a lot of this kind of shows what is kind of possible within the constraints of what the administration is able to fund and how the council is able to shift money over to find funding for things. So they were a little bit limited on that. Eastern Market's big. They're doing a lot over there. They're going to rebuild Shed 4. Folks are familiar right now. It's kind of an open stall. They want to close it and make it kind of more of an indoor place like Shed 5. They're also doing a lot with like repairing streets over there and creating a couple of commercial buildings, but that mostly goes toward the Shed 4 construction. And yeah, Auditor General is another one. They have been coming to council complaining about the poor state of their offices. And they have been, I think they got some funding in past budgets actually to do renovations, but it just hasn't happened yet. So that'll be one to watch. And then, yeah, Reparations Task Force, they received an additional $66,000 in one-time funding, and that's on top of the $350,000 that they got last year. The task force has not spent most of that. A lot of that 350 is still available. So as opposed to kind of like giving them another $350,000, they Sheffield gave them a little bit of money to keep things going, and anything that they haven't spent, they'll be able to keep and continue using. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So with that, Gabriela Romero, or Gabriela Santiago Romero, new arrivals, $1 million one-time funding to provide help for shelter for migrants, park improvements, nurse navigation program, Office of Embubs person, um, some monies. This is, I guess, the biggest thing on this would be like the new arrivals monies. Where this would go possibly, where in the city of Detroit, just this has been more, not even just a Detroit story, this has been like a national story that a lot of Black communities have said what's going on. And I think I think in framing this, I think some of the Black Americans are getting the argument wrong here, but I do understand the argument. But the argument is wrong because it's a lot of frustration in the Black community towards migrants. And I don't necessarily think that the migrant is the person that we should be placing this stress on. The person we should place this stress on are the corporations hiring the migrants. But then, really, when we look at the larger domino effect, a lot of the migrants are coming here because of some of the ways that a lot of American corporations have treated and engaged these governments in foreign places. So it's a big macro discussion. And then in also that framework, some of the benefits and some of the programming that we're seeing some migrants receive, some of this being news media, what's propaganda, what's real, some of it, I'm hearing from people I know across the country. It's like, wow, Black residents have asked for things like this for years, and the government has stonewalled that this is just impossible to happen. So it's one of those tough discussions because, like, yeah, a budget item that says $1 million to Black people would just never come to fruition in any place or space. It would be minority or underrepresented or like some other framework. So I do want to speak to that just because I know that's just such a big discussion in America right now, as Black residents feel once again underappreciated and unheard, which is true. I just don't necessarily think that migrants are the reason for that. um, Fred Durall, it was a good amount of things Fred Durall was connected to. I know Fred Durall was talking about snow removal, bus driver training, disability office, more to DDOT as well, fire department, community engagement, um, and different things, media services. This is for disabled residents, ADA compliance. These are things that Fred Durall kind of sits in the mix on. I think that at times there are larger looming issues, especially in District 7. These are kind of like some, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say safe spaces to stand in, but like it's some residents over there that are asking for other things, but these are things that will definitely add to quality of life for residents. But I don't necessarily know if these are the top things in a lot of the minds of the residents of District 7, you know?
Yeah, I think this shows he's on I believe he's chair of the disability task force, and also is chair of the budget committee. So I think this kind of shows that, he's being responsive to some of the issues that have come up in that task force. And also he has found some ways to kind of peel away relatively small amounts of money to pay for some of these things. I mean, in the grand scheme of the budget, a couple $100,000 is not that much and kind of easy to find, especially if you're much more involved in the creation of the budget. I think some of the stuff is pretty important. I mean, bus stop accessibility is definitely something we hear about a lot. So making them wheelchair accessible, upgrades at 150 stops. I think just more generally, they need more bus shelters, which also is included in this budget. I think 60 is the number, or maybe it's 600. I don't want to get that wrong, but they are building some more stops as well. But accessibility when it comes to public transit is something we hear about a lot. When it comes to like bus driver training for diversity and sensitivity, the sensitivity is around ADA accessibility. Mileage on that could vary. I don't know what the training is like currently. Extra funding for the Office of Disability Affairs gives another staff person in there. Community engagement with the fire department for outreach with the disabled community, that could be potentially life-saving, if it's about helping people learn how to get quickly out of homes or something like that in the event of an emergency. But again, $125,000 isn't that much. So yeah, I think that's what's interesting about looking. Well, I will point out too, actually, $100,000 study for a quarter retail study on Joy Road could be interesting. There's a lot of studies that were included in this and like unfunded requests for studies on things, which, personally, I feel like a lot of that ends up being just kind of a waste of time. I mean, it's good information to have, but it's like, we already kind of know some things,
some
right?
of it, but even from like the reparations discussion, sometimes the government granted study, as I'm learning, is the gateway to actually lead to policy being agreed upon. So not like in law. So in law, if a person walks in the courtroom and just starts spouting off things, if they're not an expert witness and recognized as a expert by both sides, it won't happen. But here, I think the study just gives more means, kind of like though no actions happen from the Kerner Commission report, but the whole concept of if HR 40 were ever enacted, now you have like a governmental document that supports what is being said. So you can use that to justify how to draft the policy. So now it's like it validates it further. So I understand the argument. I still feel a lot of how y'all feel, but I also know you got to talk politics to make politics happen. So Lord knows, it's like I'm talking about both sides of my grill right now, but it's political. So it kind of ends up being that I understand the grounds for it. I don't agree with it all the time because sometimes it's just like, yeah, you can use some of that money just to begin helping the corridor itself. But the city may not believe it without the study to justify that the corridor needs to be assisted.
Yeah, that's a much better way of looking. I mean, it's a first step and it helps legitimize anything that could come out of it, right? So if you already kind of know the answer is we need more retail on Joy Road and kind of what it would look like, even though this study may not tell you anything new, which maybe it will, you are able then to point at this document and say, look, this is what we got a lot of smart people and we hired some experts and this is what they said. We should listen to them. So
I mean,
if you want more retail on Joy Road, this is a good step in that direction.
And you could take this one because I mean we're talking about another one of these studies, $100,000 for one-time funding to analyze the cost of multifamily housing versus single-family homes from Coleman Young II.
Yeah, I don't know what analyze the cost. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to entail, but again, generally everyone in the city is saying we need more multifamily homes, and we're building a lot of single-family homes or like 1-2 bedroom unit apartments or housing. So yeah, I mean, maybe this could help justify policy decisions that encourage more multifamily housing. I mean, that's kind of the best I can say at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the theory of it. You know what I'm saying? It's so weird. Like, and this is where like the law and politics are so different than your life. You know what I'm saying? It's not like if if my sink if the sink breaks apart and it's like splashing water everywhere, I'm not necessarily going to say, all right, let me research the matter. I'm going to call a plumber. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to resolve the issue. That's not how things work in these fields. And we close out with Councilmember Waters, a good amount of projects too. Senior Accessibility Fund, 1 million, funding for senior accessibility. Tenants' rights. This, I guess, kind of goes Tenant Rights Commission, as this is becoming more and more of a discussion in the city of Detroit because, I mean, little do we know, you probably know the figures directly, but Detroit has completely transitioned to like a renter's place. And the renters' rights here, from a lot of the people I know that have moved here from other places, say like the renters' rights here are not good at all. Like you almost really don't have as much say at all because it was for so long such a housing stock type city, which is not necessarily a justification for renters to get ran rickshaw over. But share a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, we used to be the model for middle class Black home ownership, and now we are either a majority renter city or 50-50, depending on what the latest numbers have said. When we crossed over that threshold to be majority renter, it was definitely a shock for a lot of people. And as we were talking about the lead, I mean, a lot of the rental housing stock is in poor condition. A lot of it is unlicensed and not regulated in the way that it should be, or at least the enforcement is not there. There's been a lot of studies about that, how the housing stock is just in really bad condition and sometimes doesn't even have permission to be offered as rental. So a tenants' rights commission, I think, would address a lot of things around tenants' rights, basically. When it comes to like your lease, your ability to get repairs done at the property, it probably would support with some of the eviction defense, because as they found in the right to counsel and actually getting lawyers to people who are being kicked out by their landlords. When you have a lawyer, like 95% of the time, you get to stay in the place. And sometimes landlords bring eviction cases on false pretenses or as a way to kind of push people out. So yeah, this recurring funds would create a tenants' rights commission. I'm very curious to see where this goes. The Detroit Tenants' Rights Association is a group that is probably aligned in some of this work. It's a grassroots organization that found in the last couple of years here to empower tenants through kind of collective action and collective organizing. So creating something at the city level, I think, is pretty significant, and we're gonna have to see where that goes.
Yeah, and it's also unique when we think about this. This kind of goes into like funding some things that you just wonder what's the sustainability, like a young entrepreneur position inside of the young entrepreneurs program for the DEGC. $150,000 starting at. How will that be sustained? Where will that come from? Will that be consistent with the budget? Possibly. And even a veterans office, same thing. How will that sustainability take place? And even the Tenants' Rights Commission, because that alone, I can already tell you, when that gets rolling, they're gonna come up with a whole lot of stuff where I can imagine you may need about $25 million just for lawyers to really execute empowering people on what could be done connected to a project like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
So with that being said, this is another public comment. Let's see. Let's remove. So another public comment every Thursday morning, 8 a.m. I know we missed last week. It was some other project that I was working on. New cool stuff coming. Also, Malachi delivered one hell of a story on reparations, almost to the point where it'll hold you silent because it's so in-depth analysis. And he gave an excellent point on where things stand. Like and this will continue to be something covered, like a lot of this stuff we'll cover. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure we're going to reference back to some of these budget pieces as time goes on, as the mayor will be delivering the State of the City address next week. And we're going to be talking about that next week with public comment. But you're going to keep this thing rolling. What you got to say, Malachi?
BridgeDetroit.com. Come on down. Free newsletters for everybody. Free information for everybody. We've got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe lately. And yeah, we've got reparations task force, some really in-depth reporting that I did. Bear with me. It's a lot of words, but we're trying to do some things to make it a little more accessible for folks. But in today's newsletter, there's a couple of takeaways. So sign up online for free at bridgedetroit.com and stick with us. We are out of the budget season, but State of the City is coming up. The Mackinac Policy Conference is coming up. There's a lot of things on the horizon to talk about. And I'm tired, but I'm excited. I'm excited for all that. So
hilarious.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, definitely. For a while, I know we got a vacation coming up for the good brother, Mr. Barrett, sometime soon too. So just keep that in mind. All right, keep that in mind. We're gonna be locking in. We're gonna bring in some guests pretty soon. I have a very, 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 I would say, in-depth and cool breakdown with Theo Pryor, the Detroit People's Platform. So watch that. It gives a good macro to micro look at what's happening around development, around tax incentives, around the whole concept that a tax incentive package can actually be sold in the city of Detroit. So be checking for Detroit is Different too. With that, peace.